Miles of empty highway stretched in every direction, disappearing into endless forests and forgotten fields. During the day, the place looked ordinary enough, a weathered building with flickering signs, cracked pavement, and fuel pumps older than most of the cars that stopped there. But at night, everything changed. The first sign that something was wrong came during one of the quietest nights I had ever worked at the gas station. It was just after midnight, and the highway outside was completely deserted. The steady hum of the fluorescent lights filled the empty building while a weak rain tapped against the windows. I sat behind the counter, fighting off boredom, occasionally glancing at the security monitors mounted above the register. Everything appeared normal until one of the camera feeds flickered. A small notification appeared on the screen, indicating movement near pump 3. Assuming a customer had arrived, I looked up from my chair and toward the parking lot. To my surprise, there was nobody there. The pump stood empty beneath the pale glow of the overhead lights. No cars. No people. Nothing. Thinking it was a glitch, I returned my attention to the monitor. The camera clearly showed a man standing beside pump 3. He wasn't moving. He simply stood there with his hands hanging at his sides. His face was impossible to make out because the image appeared strangely distorted around him. The longer I stared, the more uncomfortable I became. I rushed to the front door and looked outside again. The parking lot remained completely empty. My eyes returned to the monitor. The man was still there. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. For several seconds, I stood frozen between what the camera showed and what my own eyes could see. Then the figure slowly turned toward the building. Even through the grainy footage, I could tell he was looking directly at the entrance. A loud burst of static erupted from the monitor speakers. The image shook violently. When the interference cleared, the figure had vanished. I spent the next hour convincing myself that faulty equipment was to blame. But around 2 o'clock, it happened again. This time the camera showed a woman standing near the ice machine outside. She appeared perfectly still, her head tilted slightly as though listening to something only she could hear. Once again, the parking lot was empty when I checked through the windows. Then another figure appeared. And another. Soon multiple people occupied different areas of the security feed, silently watching the building from outside. None of them ever approached the doors. None of them entered the station. Yet every one of them seemed to be waiting for something. The journal was discovered by accident during a slow shift a few nights after the strange figures first appeared on the security cameras. Business had been non-existent for hours, and I had started cleaning parts of the station that most employees ignored. While organizing old receipts beneath the counter, I noticed a loose wooden panel hidden near the back wall. Curious, I pulled it aside and found a small compartment coated in dust. Inside rested a thick leather-bound journal. The cover was cracked with age, and its pages had turned yellow from decades of neglect. There was no title, no name, and no indication of who had started it. The moment I opened it, a strange feeling settled over me, as though I had uncovered something that was never meant to be found. The earliest entries dated back more than 50 years. At first, the notes seemed harmless. Different employees described long shifts, difficult customers, and the loneliness of working overnight beside an empty highway. But as the entries progressed, the tone began to change. Workers wrote about hearing voices in the parking lot when nobody was outside. Others described customers who appeared without vehicles and disappeared moments later. One entry mentioned a young woman who entered the station drenched from a storm, purchased a bottle of water, and left without speaking. Days later, the employee learned that the woman had supposedly died in a car accident nearly a week before the encounter. The deeper I read, the darker the stories became. Several writers described seeing the same shadowy figure standing beneath the lights outside. Others claimed the gas station occasionally appeared in places where it should not have existed. Travelers reported taking unfamiliar roads and somehow arriving at the station despite never seeing it on maps. What disturbed me most were the names. Many entries ended with signatures from employees who documented months or even years of strange experiences. Yet their records always stopped abruptly. No farewell messages. No explanations. Just silence. One writer detailed increasingly terrifying events over several weeks. The final pages became frantic and difficult to read. Words were scribbled across the paper as though written in panic. The last entry contained only a warning. If you find this journal, do not trust the customers who arrive after 3:13 a.m. They already know who you are. There were no further entries after that. Only several blank pages and a faint dark stain near the bottom corner that looked disturbingly similar to dried blood. For several nights after discovering the journal, I found myself constantly checking the clock. The warning about 3:13 a.m. lingered in my thoughts no matter how hard I tried to dismiss it. I told myself it was just an old ghost story written by bored employees working lonely shifts. Yet every night, as the minutes crept closer to that specific time, an uneasy feeling settled over the station. The first time I saw the sedan, the clock on the register read exactly 3:13 a.m. A pair of headlights emerged from the darkness beyond the highway. Their glow cut through the fog that had gathered across the road, moving slowly toward the station. Unlike most customers, the vehicle wasn't speeding or drifting from lane to lane after a long drive. It moved with deliberate precision, as if following a route it had traveled countless times before. The black sedan rolled into the parking lot and stopped beside Pump 4. Its engine continued running. No doors opened. No windows lowered. Nobody stepped outside. I waited several minutes, expecting the driver to enter the store. Instead, the vehicle remained perfectly still beneath the overhead lights. Something about it felt unnatural. The headlights stayed on, illuminating the empty pavement ahead, while the dark windows reflected nothing but shadows. Curiosity eventually overcame caution. I moved closer to the front windows and tried to get a better look inside. That was when I noticed a figure sitting behind the wheel. The driver appeared motionless. His face was hidden in darkness despite the light shining directly through the windshield. It was as though the shadows themselves were concealing him. A chill ran through my body. Then the radio behind the counter suddenly crackled with static. Through the noise came a voice. My voice. The recording repeated a sentence I had spoken earlier that day while alone in my apartment. No one should have heard it. No one could have known those words. The static faded. The station fell silent once more. When I looked back toward the sedan, the driver had turned his head. Even from across the parking lot, I knew he was staring directly at me. A feeling of dread washed over me as memories I had never shared with anyone surfaced in my mind. Childhood fears. Forgotten mistakes. Private thoughts buried years ago. Somehow, impossibly, the figure inside that vehicle seemed aware of every one of them, and as the clock changed to 3:14 a.m., the driver's hand slowly lifted and pointed toward the gas station door. The black sedan continued appearing every night, and with each visit my unease grew stronger. Sleep became difficult. The journal's warnings, the figures on the cameras, and the silent driver haunted my thoughts even when I was away from work. Eventually, I became determined to find a rational explanation for everything. If the gas station had a history, if there was some reason behind the strange events, I was going to uncover it. During one of my days off, I began researching the station. I started with the obvious places. Online maps, local directories, county records, and business listings. At first, I assumed the station would appear instantly. After all, it sat beside a major stretch of highway and served travelers every day. Yet after hours of searching, I found nothing. The address printed on receipts didn't exist. The road number connected to the property led to an entirely different location. Even satellite maps showed only an empty patch of land where the station should have been. Confused, I contacted local authorities and asked whether the property had changed ownership recently. The woman on the phone sounded puzzled. According to official records, no gas station had operated in that area for decades. The answer made no sense. I worked there every night. Customers stopped there constantly. Fuel deliveries arrived every week. Yet every document I found suggested the building shouldn't exist at all. The deeper I dug, the stranger things became. While searching through old newspaper archives, I discovered several reports involving missing travelers. The cases stretched back many years, and at first they appeared unrelated. Different ages. Different backgrounds. Different destinations. But one detail connected them. Before disappearing, each person had told family members or friends about stopping at a remote gas station during their journey. Several witnesses even described the station in remarkable detail. The faded sign. The aging fuel pumps. The endless highway. The exact place where I worked. One article featured a photograph recovered from a missing traveler's camera. The image showed the gas station late at night. I stared at it for several moments before noticing something horrifying. Standing beneath the station lights were dozens of shadowy figures. The same figures I had seen on the security cameras. The article stated the photograph had been taken nearly 20 years earlier. Yet among those silent figures, one face stood out. A man wearing my uniform. A man who looked exactly like me, staring directly into the camera with an expression of absolute terror as though he already knew what was coming next. The photograph haunted me for days. No matter how many times I looked at it, the figure wearing my uniform remained there, frozen beneath the gas station lights. It was impossible. The image had been taken 20 years earlier, long before I had ever heard of the station. Yet the resemblance was perfect, down to the shape of the face and the terrified expression staring into the camera. I needed answers. The following night, I arrived for work determined to uncover the truth. The station felt different the moment I stepped inside. The air seemed heavier. The buzzing lights sounded distant, as though I were hearing them from underwater. Even the highway outside appeared strangely empty. Hours passed without a single customer. Then 3:13 a.m. arrived. The black sedan emerged from the darkness as it always did and rolled silently into the parking lot. This time, however, the driver's door opened. For the first time, the figure stepped out. He moved slowly toward the station entrance, his face hidden beneath impossible shadows. As he approached, every light inside the building began flickering violently. The security monitors filled with static. The radio crackled with distorted voices speaking in languages I couldn't understand. Then the front door opened. The figure entered. A freezing cold swept through the room. When he finally lifted his head, I felt my heart stop. The face staring back at me was my own. Older. Paler. Exhausted. His eyes carried a sadness so deep it seemed endless. Before I could speak, he pointed toward the windows. Outside, the world had changed. The highway was gone. The surrounding fields had vanished. Beyond the parking lot stretched an endless darkness filled with distant lights drifting like stars through a black ocean. Shapes moved within that darkness, countless figures wandering aimlessly between places that did not exist. The older version of myself explained the truth. The gas station was never part of the ordinary world. It existed between destinations, appearing only to those who had become lost in ways they did not yet understand. Some travelers arrived after taking wrong turns. Others came after moments of tragedy. Many never realized they had crossed into something beyond reality. The shadowy figures outside were not customers. They were souls trapped between beginnings and endings. Then he revealed the final secret. The station required a caretaker. Someone had always remained behind to keep the doors open and the lights burning. The journal's previous writers had not disappeared. They had become part of the station itself. And now, after years of waiting, the station had chosen its next keeper.